Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Bodybuilding, Mountain. And today I'm going to answer a question or a comment that was made on one of my videos. And this guy was asking me, he said, Jason, have you always been drug-free or always been natural? Because he saw some pictures of me and he's like, there's no way a natural guy could be looking like you back in the day. You must have cheated or used some drugs or performance-enhancing shit or whatever, you know? And my answer always is the truth. And the truth is, I've always been drug-free, I've always been natural, and I've always stayed away from steroids of any kind or performance-enhancing drugs and stuff. I use supplements like creatine and protein powder and glutamine and those sort of things, but I never used any precursors to hormones. I never used any pro hormones or any hormones or anything like that. So I've always stayed drug-free because I always went by the WNBF guidelines, the World Natural Bodybuilding Federation, so that way I could compete with them. So on that note, this guy then went on and said, okay, you competed in natural shows, but then you competed in the Muscle Mania, so that means you're not natural automatically. I'm like, really? Like, there's natural guys that compete in drug shows all the time. A lot of times they get their ass handed to them, like I did at the Muscle Manias, usually, right? Because depending on where you competed, would depend on what you're up against, right? If you competed in a show in California or Florida, you'd have a lot stiffer competition than, say, maybe in, the Provincial championships in BC or something like that, right? Just because of population, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you have more people or more of a pool of people to pull from, you're going to have a larger amount of competitive bodybuilders in that demographic, right? So the whole point is that I would compete in drug-free bodybuilding, being a perfectly natural bodybuilder, but then I would also realize that if I want to make a career as a natural bodybuilder, I would have to go where the media was, right? There was no Instagram, there was no television coverage in your local town. If you wanted to get on ESPN, you had to go to the shows that had that type of coverage. Or if you wanted to meet photographers, you had to go where the photographers were going. And it didn't matter what the guidelines were for that show or not. So the Muscle Mania was classified as a natural show, but we all know that urine-tested shows aren't really natural. They're part natural, but not really. Let's just say I know some stuff, but the bottom line is that back then I would not classify the Muscle Mania shows as natural, but they were the best shows to go to for media or for meeting people or for getting recruited for a TV show or something. I remember there was like people there trying to recruit people for like a Jerry Springer type of scenario and stuff. So there was always some sort of media opportunity or some sort of people that you would meet with, right? So the good thing about those shows was that because they were so well promoted, there was a good chance that you were going to network. And that really was the necessity back in the day if you wanted to be on magazine covers or if you wanted to get magazine coverage. And the whole reason why you wanted that was because then you would have sponsorships. Because once you've built your name and your brand up, then maybe a company would come and want to sponsor you or support you in your competitive endeavors. So what I would do is I would compete in a natural show and make sure that I'm in shape. And then I would go to these shows like the Muscle Mania, not intending to win, but just going to show up and looking decent. And therefore I could talk to people or network and see if there was some sort of opportunities that I could take advantage of, right? But it wasn't about me going in that show and winning, So I wasn't going in there to be competitive as much as I tried my best. But the bottom line is that when a guy outweighs you by 30 pounds, it's pretty tough to beat him on stage, right? Especially when he's also leaner, So this brings me to the conversation that a lot of people don't realize. They don't understand that a person that's at the top 5 or 10% of natural bodybuilders in the world will beat most local beginner to intermediate drug bodybuilders. You see what I'm saying? Like, I competed in my state championship. It's called Provincial in Canada, right? I competed and won the overall in that show. And I knew 3 other naturals that did the same thing. They won the overall in a show that was a non-tested show, even though these guys were 100% natural. Because natural bodybuilders, if they're at the elite level, they will have the balance and the proportions and the overall symmetry and muscle mass to beat the average, weekend drug guy. You know what I'm saying? So I knew a lot of guys that did this. So in 2002, because I just wanted to compete locally, so I competed at my local show that was a non-tested show, and I won. I won the overall at that show. Now, it always depends on who shows up, of course, at any show. But because there's not this, or at least at the time, there wasn't this massive amount of bodybuilders competing in these championships where I live, I did have a good chance at winning against some of these guys that were using drugs. So the bottom line is, an elite natural bodybuilder will beat the lower level drug guys, right? But once you start getting to national championships and so forth, you know, a natural guy might be able to do okay if he's elite, you know? If he's really elite, he might be able to do okay in his division. He might be able to win his division, but to win the overall, it's going to be really tough. And even if he is a crazy sort of freak and he wins the overall, the national amateur championship, he's going to have a hell of a time doing anything in the pros if he's a totally natural guy. And I'm talking about him competing in the non-tested IFBB type federation, right? So a lot of people don't realize that elite natural bodybuilders can look quite extreme. They can look quite lean. They can be pumped. They're just not as big and as lean as the drug guys. And a lot of times the big mistake that people make is that they'll look at a photograph and they'll see somebody that has some impressive proportions and they'll automatically assume, oh, that guy looks pretty good. He looks as good as this bodybuilder here. But a photograph doesn't tell you the whole story. If you put these two people beside each other in the gym, you're going to see a much different story at that point. Natural guy and drug guy, you're going to see the drug guy being way bigger and way more massive. It's going to be like David and Goliath in a lot of cases. So that's something that I find is a misunderstood concept. People misunderstand lighting. They misunderstand lighting. They misunderstand a tan, and they misunderstand being lean is not the same as being big, right? And they also misunderstand the power of photography and angles and lenses and all that sort of thing. So you could have a great photographer and he could take a picture of a natural bodybuilder, and that natural bodybuilder might be 160, 170, 180 pounds, and he might look like he's a 240 pound bodybuilder, but it's all about the illusion at that case, you know, it's all about the shadowing and the lighting and all that. So don't jump the gun on your judgments, right? Or your assumptions just because you see a photo that looks kind of impressive. It's not the same. Like when I was elite, like say really in shape on stage, 5'8", I was around 186 to 188 in that area. And I still, some people would say still, was too fat to really compete at elite levels. You know what I'm saying? Like I probably could have shredded another, you know, % of body fat off to compete with the drug guys, right? So I was not as lean as them and I was not as heavy as them, but I was an elite natural bodybuilder. And yeah, that's my story really. The thing is that, yeah, I competed in all sorts of shows. I tried to make a career out of this natural bodybuilding thing without moving down to LA. And that was probably a mistake, but in my opinion, it was the best thing I ever did. It's the best thing I ever did was not move down there, because a lot of people don't understand, and I talked about this on the podcast, is that charisma, and there's a lot of charismatic people down in California or LA, you know, in that whole fitness industry and stuff. It's not always the same as truth or integrity, right? So it was kind of like a, let's just say of kill or be killed type of land, you know what I'm saying? Like it was like, you know, everybody was an opportunity. Everybody was looking for an opportunity. They're looking to, you know, expand their horizons. And that didn't seem like the type of life that I wanted to settle into as my normal state. You know, venturing in there as a vacation here and there was okay. You know, going into a competition, trying to make a career, get a photo shoot or two. But I didn't want to live in that area and, you know, have absolutely no support group or community that really gave a shit about whether I lived or died, you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of why I didn't really make that move. That's why I didn't feel compelled to go down there and really pursue the natural bodybuilding career in that way, because, you know, it's a tough gig. It was a tough gig to get going back then. It was a tough gig to make a living at it. And yeah, it was a risk. It was a risk, but you know, I just had other priorities. I just wasn't interested at that point, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, sometimes, you know, you have a certain dream of something and then you pursue it for a period of time and then you realize, hey, that's not really what I want, you know? So I wasn't really willing to leave my family or everybody I knew, all my community, and then live in a place full of strangers and hedonism and all the crazy shit that goes on down in LA, right? So anyway, yeah, that's my story. That's why I competed in different shows. I competed in some shows for media and then other shows to win. And I tried to win at all the shows, but I always stayed 100% natural, because that was my set point. That was where my moral compass was. I always wanted to be a drug-free bodybuilder. I always wanted to maintain that, because I didn't want to sell my soul you know, to get some muscular gains or to get a trophy and then of course lose it later. I didn't want to lose those gains, right? So if you don't understand why I became a natural bodybuilder, watch my video, why I became a natural bodybuilder, and I explain it in depth on that video. So just watch that if you want to understand my psyche or what was going on inside my head and why I did what I did. So yeah, I hope this educates you a little bit. I hope this helps you out. Thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalbodybuilding.com, and thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now. Mountain.